Global Familia, welcome to episode 11 of Cheddar Dogs. Oweezy, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. PD, my main man. Good as always to be here. What's today's bone of contention?
Well, Oweezy, she's the captain of the ship. They call her
I
skipper,
wish.
but the way she turns the money over, we should all call her flipper. Sharoni Ryan, welcome to Cheddar Dogs. Thank you
Thank you
for
so
being
much,
on the
Peter
show.
and P-Dog and O-Dog. Great to be here. Love what you guys are doing with Chatter Dog. So happy to be a part of it. Can't wait to get
Thank you.
started.
Thank you. It's great
Great,
to have you on
great,
the show.
great.
It's Women's Month this month, and we know we need to give pay tribute to the women in the world out there that's making things happen, that's inspiring, that's turning the world upside down, so to speak. Oweezy, what do you have to say there?
Well, yes, PD, I think you nailed it on the head. Being Women's Month in South Africa and Women's Day not so long ago. It's a day in South Africa where we just single out all the wonderful and beautiful women of this country and the world. And we say a big shout out to all the hard work that they do, the contributions they make to our society, to our economy, to our families. And we would really
Absolutely.
not be anywhere without them. So I am so proud and glad to have Sharoni Ryan on as our female representative of Women's Month for this episode. And she's going to take us through her story of how she became a well documented, orientated, successful woman who's here to spread a little bit of inspiration and to inspire us all to get off our backsides and go do that masters.
Amen, brother.
Sharoni.
Amen. And that's what we're here for. We're here for inspiration. Yeah,
Well,
Sharoni, over
I'll
to
do my
you.
best.
Welcome.
No pressure, but I will do my best.
That's it. No stress. We're here to have fun. So,
Yes,
yeah,
Sharoni,
tell
if
us
you
your
could just
story.
Just take us through the beginning. Did you decide? Was it something you always wanted to pursue? Was it something you were forced to from perhaps your parents or other pressures? Did you want to keep up with the Joneses or the Kardashians? What made you go down this road? Please break it down for us.
Well, it's certainly not keeping up with anyone because I mean this industry doesn't really pay too well. But no, it definitely wasn't forced. I would say, I had an interest in the hospitality industry from the high school. I mean, when I think of, I picked my subjects and all of that kind of thing. But it wasn't necessarily on my top thing to study. I was thinking along the lines of interior design, fashion design, and hospitality was one of them as well. The reason why I ended up going into that program was because that particular time they had two intakes. So I was a little bit late for the January intake, and they did a mid-year intake in July, and that is why I decided to start with that because I didn't have the privilege of a full gap year. So I wasn't forced to study what I did study, but I think there was some level of encouragement certainly to study. That mom was like, you cannot do nothing, you have to get an education, and so choose whatever it's going to be. And that's
Absolutely.
where that started. Money was an object, the hard life was there. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like there was a trust fund waiting for me or money in a bank account somewhere. I had to make ship happen, really. And
Okay, okay.
yeah,
Self-made.
literally.
Self-made.
I didn't have money. In my first year, I had to get a student loan, and I think
Like
one
most
of my
people.
sisters, yes, yeah, sign for that, and it worked out well actually that I had this these 6 months in between starting my diploma. Initially, that's what I started, and I was able to get a part-time job during that time. So I worked for Standard Bank as a debt collector. I used to work night shift and
Oh,
be that
wow.
awful person that would call you and be like, your check account is overdrawn with 500 rand.
Did you
When are you
did
going to
you have
make
a
a
baseball
deposit?
bat? Did you have a baseball bat? Please tell me you had a baseball bat.
I had one, just no one could see it. But yes, I had
Ah,
one, and
okay, okay.
that's what I did. For money, I hustled. I went to work every night. I got there at 3 o'clock, left at 9 p.m., and I was a debt
Wow.
collector.
Sure.
And I would when I started varsity, it helped because I was able to keep that job at the same time because I would usually go till about 2 o'clock or so. I'd catch a bus. up into Braamfontein, into town, and then I would be at my job until 9 o'clock in the night. So I was doing both, and that also mindset and that hustle, that doing both helped later on, because when I actually did start studying my master's, I also had to do the same thing. I had to juggle work and studying at the same time. So those lessons came along handy later in life as well. But yes, I went through my then diploma in and out of different part-time debt collecting jobs for banks where I could
Okay.
to pay my way. And I didn't take a student loan from second and third year. I paid for it from my pocket,
Oh,
from
well
work.
done.
So it was tough, but I did it. I was committed to it. By the time I finished my diploma, then there was a bursary opportunity with a company that did a sponsorship, and I was awarded that bursary to study my
Fantastic.
degree, my BTech, and I did that part time for 2 years while working for this company, a hospitality software solution company. So while I had done some time in the industry as a trainee which was mandatory part of my diploma in hospitality management, I then did the bursary with them, and it was more, like I say, configuration software, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then I didn't stay with him too long before moving on, and it was I had now graduated with my diploma, and so I was ready to actually go and work in the industry. And I would say I was lucky. I really was, because my first job as after my I qualified with my diploma was as a boutique hotel general manager for a nice
Okay.
five-star property in out in
Wow.
Northcliffe, and it was fantastic. I had a great time there. I was a jack of all trades, learned a lot, learned how to be independent, certainly, and self sufficient
Mhm.
in that role, because, I didn't have the numbers and volume of staff that traditional hospitality establishments would have.
Would have, yeah.
So there
Mm.
was a lot of pressure as well, but it was fun. It was really rewarding in many ways. And then moved on to go and lecture. Well, not really lecture too much at that point, but that's really, I suppose, where the love, or where I started to see this is something I might like to do, where I then went back to where I'd studied, and I was, doing some guest relations events, all of that sort of thing, still in the industry, but then working with the students who were studying hospitality management as well. And I was like, okay, this is
Mm.
kind of nice. I'm not as guest facing as I was in a hotel. I have a little bit more of work life balance, because for me, that's what it was about. What
Mm.
deterred
Mm.
me from staying operational in the industry was, in fact, the lack of work life balance that I had. Of course, you're running weddings, and weekends are when it happens,
Yeah.
so you
Sure.
have no real balance. And I was thinking ahead into the future. Perhaps if I ever wanted a family, what would this look like? I was never around. I barely had time for myself. So how could I make, at that point, all I had was my diploma. I was busy with I hadn't finished my degree yet. I was busy with it. But how am I going to make this work for me, in that's going to accommodate all the facets of my life that I'd like to have
Yes.
attention in.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so when I actually went and I was doing the guest relations and so on, it made sense, because this is where I saw an opportunity. I saw a path, I saw an avenue, I saw something that I liked. For me, it wasn't as intense as in guest facing non-stop. And I thought, okay, this is how can I pursue this further. And at that time, I wasn't necessarily thinking about going abroad. I knew I always wanted to, but there was nothing really on the cards at that time that I was actively pursuing. What I started to pursue was thinking, okay, well, I'd like to be an academic. I'd like to be a lecturer. And the only way you could be one is with a master's degree. And that's where the inspiration for the master's came along. So while I
Okay.
was there, I finished and graduated with a Bachelor of Technology, and that was great. I had my second graduation, walked the stage, woohoo.
Lovely.
Showed off
And
your
I thought
skills.
I was done. Then I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Sure.
Done. Finished.
um, my supervisor that actually ended up supervising my dissertation. She started off initially as my lecturer, and then she was my colleague, and she was also my friend, and now she was going to be
Wow.
supervisor
How's
to
that?
my
Okay.
dissertation. So it was a relationship, where we spoke very frankly and very candidly about the pros and cons of all of these things, and we so agreed to actually do my masters, and I wrote the proposal. I presented it to a panel, The topic came from the mayor of, was suggested at that time from the mayor of Johannesburg. It was Parks Tower at that
Box
time,
top.
right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
So that topic was inspired by him and what we were trying to do for the city, the COJ at that point. And I then committed to doing my masters for the next 2 years, and I thought it would still be simultaneously while working, at the university.
And Sharoni,
But
what is the title of your dissertation?
it is consumer needs for a healthy quota in the Soweto district. That's what it is.
Okay. So it was very
Now,
Very
specific.
interesting.
it's
Okay,
very
okay,
specific. We narrowed it and narrowed it and narrowed it down, and that's really what the
okay.
thesis is, right? It's so narrow. It's such a
It
niche
is, yeah,
that you
it
have
is a
to
niche.
get to. So when we started that, and I started the research for that, I was in South Africa, but about 9 months, I would say about 9 months into it, um, I actually got a job offer in the Maldives.
Wow,
And
what a pleasure.
yeah, I took that job offer, but I was still doing my masters, and I was going to try and do this remotely. And we
Nice.
knew my supervisor and I knew it was going to be tough, but not impossible. And so there I was, starting this journey.
So
And
was this still the Maldives job? Was that also in hospitality?
yes, it was. So it was in learning and development as well, which was up my
Okay,
alley because it aligned with lecturing and that sort of thing as
correct.
well. Teaching really same sort of avenue. And it was an opportunity to obviously go abroad, work with a nice big hotel chain, of course, get some
Nice.
sun and catch tan. So who says no,
Get
right?
some dollars.
Yeah, earn some dollars.
Exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Get away from the rat race for a little while. And I headed over there. We knew it was going to be challenging. I did my field work from my office in Maldives. I had
Oh,
employed people to do it for me. I was juggling it to actually get the research done. And I stayed there for a year, and I was still busy with this master's, and I was writing up the dissertation and the results and the findings and all of that. And would you believe, during that time, after Maldives, about 8 months later or so, I joined my first cruise line. So I still wasn't complete with this master's degree,
Wow.
okay? And
but you
this
were still
was
hustling on the side.
still hustling, and and paying for this, right? Because now I'm paying for it out of
Wow.
my salary as
Obviously,
well,
yeah.
still trying to pay for it, and taking those lump sums that would come in. And that was also more motivation for those dollars, to go away from home and
Yes.
try and earn it
Makes
and
sense.
pay for it. And I like things to be paid in cash. I don't like skult. So
No, no, no,
um
no,
where
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
can avoid
See
it, I
episode
do. I
10.
do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there I was, and I wrote, and this is where really the biggest lesson or challenge, I suppose, came in. I wrote up the final dissertation while on a ship,
A very
while
well known
cruising. I
ship.
was on a world voyage. I was on a world voyage, and I would work. So just to give you some reference on a cruise ship, you work anything from 10 to 14 hours a day, every day for your whole contract.
Wow.
You don't have
That's
one day off. You
crazy.
have hours off in a day.
That's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
had to structure myself. I'm also the only person that does my job on the ship, and I do it for all the crew. So I'm the learning and development manager, and from the captain down, I need to make sure that their training and everything is going on. So I have my work cut out for me. And I would train in the morning, take a little break at lunchtime, a couple of hours maybe, get off the ship, going to port, because this is what I'm here for, right? I'm here to explore,
Yeah, it's
go
your
and do
job.
my
Yeah.
thing, okay, get
Yes,
exhausted,
yes.
come back straight to work again till about 8, 9 o'clock. I'd leave
Jeez.
work, I would, shower, have dinner, change. And my only discipline was that I had to go back to the office to do this, because if I sat in my cabin to do it, I just didn't, right? I'd go
Yeah, no.
make every excuse, and it was like, no, I'm going to sleep. So I had to go back to my office, and I would sit there and literally burn the midnight oil till about 1 a.m. every morning. And when I'm telling you, blood, sweat, tears, they were real. Every day. I used
I
to
can
cry.
imagine.
I used to cry. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. I was
But
exhausted. I
what was
Go ahead.
driving you at that point? I mean, you were at a stage where you wanted to I mean, you were in tears, blood, sweat, you name it. You were at a point of probably giving up. I'm sure you it
I
felt that
was.
way at some point.
Yes, and I
What?
attempted to many times.
But what kept you going? What was that inspiration that kept that spark going in that engine inside you that just said, no, the
Well,
show must go on. I need to
there
finish.
were a few things, there were a few things, and I think the one was I was too deep in it, or I was too far in it
Mm.
to back out. It would have been such a big loss of my time, investment, money, etc., etc. Had I just walked out at that point. Then there was also um, my supervisor, God bless her, telling me, that I could do this, and that I am smart enough to do it, because I even doubted, because all of a sudden you're like a writer overnight, and you go back and
Yeah,
read this
yeah.
stuff and you're like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
Shakespeare would be proud. But it was her as well, that motivation, like, you can do this, you can be great. For me, it was also understanding the initial goal of me studying this master's was to, pursue a career in academia, but understanding that now I was, living this lovely life on a cruise ship, and yes, still teaching, but there's, a couple of variables that enable you to be there. For one, you need to be fit for duty, right? And go through
Yes,
this
yes.
extensive medical. If anything happens along the line, this career can end quite suddenly with no real forewarning.
They'll make you walk
To
the
be
plank.
yeah,
Yes.
pretty much, right? And if that happens, what's your backup plan? I have to think about what is my backup plan. Also, I didn't think I'm going to do my sea life forever. So what comes after that? I also had a desire to make a difference. Really, I did, because at that time my plan was. It's on pause a little at the moment, but was really to get the research done, for my topic, which really spoke a lot about the obesity pandemic that we are currently experiencing in South Africa, where that is coming from, what's driving that, how the street food, the quota, is contributing to that. What are
I think the whole world's,
absolutely,
That's a
and what is
global
like.
going
thing.
through this obesity pandemic.
Yes, yes,
So I'm just pushing
absolutely. But
myself again.
linking it back to affordability, because if we look at the price of a quota, your value for money, and we look at the general socioeconomic status of the person buying that item, you can
Yeah.
understand why any person would buy it, right? But then we
Mm.
don't really think about the effects of that.
Mm.
Also the study looked at the food safety knowledge of street food vendors and things like that. And so I thought at that point, if I were then to pursue a PhD after this, it
Sure.
would zone in a little bit more on perhaps creating the actual solution for the findings, the results of the initial dissertation. So yes,
That's
I'd like to contribute, give back, right? Give
for
back.
sure,
And
for sure.
honestly, anybody wants a healthier society. I've been on my own little health journey, especially in the last few years. So that's really where
And I think the results of that would be very interesting, because the fact is that the man on the street, the poor man on the street, will eat to fill his belly to know that he
yes,
can carry on
absolutely,
until he's hungry again.
absolutely.
He's not going to go find a lettuce leaf and go, oh, I'm watching my weight. Let me just have this.
Of
No,
course
nothing.
not.
They're gonna hit the.
Shalom, if I
Hmm.
Yeah,
could just jump in there quick. So obviously, from what it sounds like, you've started from humble beginnings, and from debt collecting on people's doors and arresting them for not paying their overdrafts and credit cards. Um,
Yes.
has this paid off for you? When we talk about costs and return on investment and the money you've put in, apart from just the effort and the time, has this master's degree paid off for you, or paid you back to say that you are at perhaps an elite point of a selected field that could maybe be considered for special opportunities that would open unique doors for you, and really you can look back and say it was honestly worth my while, the late nights, the debt collecting, the sleeping, the midnight oils and candles and whatever were got burnt, as long as you never
Absolutely.
burnt the ship. So you would ideally recommend it for view, not just women but anyone out there considering further
Yes.
education as a whole, and to develop themselves.
Absolutely, Odog. You know what? I am an advocate for education, really and truly. I would say, especially when I was younger and when I was doing it and when I was in my first few jobs and obviously not earning much and slogging and trying to get the promotion and, trying find my feet and my place in the world. I was like, no, I paid all this money for this expensive degree and it's not paying off. And particularly hospitality, because it's not a cheap qualification for generally what the
Sure.
industry in South Africa especially pays you. So I did at times, have my doubts or my regrets, as in, I could have been a dentist instead or something like that,
Sure.
but now I can absolutely 100% say yes, it has paid off. I would recommend it to any person, and don't get disheartened in the beginning in those first few years, because I think when we come out of varsity we automatically want that management position, right? And we want the big salary that comes with it, and we want to buy a nice car and move out of our mother's houses and all of those things. Just be patient. It will come. It will really come if you just work hard. But the key is also to, even after the education, continue developing yourself, pushing yourself, seeking promotional opportunities. There's so many development opportunities, especially with the big corporates, and their learning and development offerings and things like that. So keep
Mm.
on keeping on. There's also bursary opportunities. There's merit bursaries. If you're going to pass well and you need to fund this. There's the NEFSA scheme. That's the national funding scheme for those who really
Sure.
can't afford it. I just like, there's no excuse, because even when I was a student and even when I was working and hustling and trying to pay for it and whatever, I was still broke. I was broke, and I tried to walk out of my studies a lot of times, because it would have been an easier thing. I was already working for the bank. I could have just gone permanent to a day shift job, and I would have been the team leader of a call center by now, which is great, right? It's great. It's still a
Hmm.
job.
Nothing
It's
wrong with that.
wonderful. But I knew I
But
didn't want that. I knew another motivating factor was travel. I knew I wanted to, and no matter how I did it, whether I was going to pay for it from my pocket, I knew I needed to be able to have a job that afforded that, or whether
hmm.
I was going to let this qualification and the work that I do take me there, and it's done that. So I'm happy to say I've just touched my 110th country last month,
Well,
Wow.
and
that's
it's
Fantastic.
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, it's been phenomenal. And on the bad days and the tired days and all of those things, I just look back and think, wow, it absolutely was worth it.
And I think what's also important is that it's, you know, everyone out there is obviously chasing the same thing. There's only so many jobs out there, so many career opportunities. So it's important to always stay ahead of the curve and improving oneself. You know what I mean? Whether it's getting your master's,
Absolutely.
PhD, or studying other things, other diplomas, whatever the case may be, always be ahead of the curve. No, and be it is competitive. So that's there's no argument there. But it's don't see it as a bad thing, because you're only bettering yourself as an individual as well. And I think that's what I'm taking from this episode right here.
Yeah,
PD,
Wisdom.
absolutely. And when you
if
talk
I
about
could
a
just say
niche
something.
and sorry, Owen, talking about the niche and staying ahead of the curve, what also drove me to study the masters in hospitality management and tourism development specifically was the fact that it's a fairly new qualification. Not many people had it, which made fall into that little pool of people. And of course, we're in a country where BEE and employment equity is very real. And so looking at the ratio of females, black females that had that qualification, they were very few. And so it put me absolutely into that niche where I knew, okay, what, if I were to
There's
apply, need to
opportunity.
apply for a job later down the line in academia, I'm the right, gender, I'm the right color, and I have the right qualification. I should put
It's a
myself in a good
no-brainer.
position. So I position
Sure.
myself where the probabilities would be in my favor, and that's what you got to do. I think a lot of people go into studies and sometimes study something really general where that field is perhaps overpopulated, and get disheartened when
Agreed.
they don't get a
Agreed.
job offer,
Mm.
or they end up doing something totally different. So
Yeah.
that's certainly what I think. It's not just about walking to university and studying. You need to think about it, strategize, roadmap yourself. Where do you see yourself
Yeah.
going? I always look at
Yeah.
everything like a cake, right? So if I want this cake, I need ingredients to bake this cake. I need eggs. I need and then I start to like really narrow it down. And okay, how am I going to get the egg? Okay, let's get some
Mm,
plans behind that egg. How am I going to get the
mm,
sugar? And then that's really how I manifest a goal. no matter which goal it is in my life. And that's been certainly one with my career.
Sure.
Billy, if I could just jump back to something you said earlier, and then I know we're running out of time here, so I'm going to make this real quick. What would you or Sharoni say to something like, if I was at my job or I knew a boss that said, "Oh, you've got a master's. I can also get my master's tonight, but guess what? It's not going to make a big deal in changing my salary overnight. Why should I even bother?" Just a quick, in a couple of seconds, how would you reply to something so small-minded where, yes, there might be a point. It might not change your salary overnight.
Absolutely.
Sharoni, you
And
first.
it probably won't. It probably won't change your salary overnight. I think there's a few fields where these type of qualifications are mandatory and will change your salary scale. But for most of us, no. I've seen it firsthand. I reap the rewards much later down the line than I ever imagined. So even at this point in time, my current work that I do, I don't need my master's degree. I don't necessarily use my master's degree. But I know one day I will. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I bank it. I just put it in the bank.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, and to also answer your question there, Weezy, um, I think if someone's telling you that, then change your job as well, because you
Yeah.
know what, having your masters it's not a small thing. You know what I mean? And a lot of corporates or institutions actually take that quite seriously. They appreciate when people empower themselves, better themselves, education and all that stuff. And they do definitely reward you financially for improving yourself. So if your boss is saying things like that, then I would definitely be thinking twice about a career change. That's my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sharoni,
No,
thank you
that's
so
true.
much for being on the show. We've loved
Thanks
your
for
story.
having me.
Very,
Sharoni,
very inspiring. Very inspiring.
yeah, sure.
If you could
Thank you,
maybe just in a
Sharoni.
couple of seconds, just really tell our viewers why they should or shouldn't or whatever, word of inspiration in literally a couple of seconds before P Dog
Oh,
bows us out.
words of inspiration. That famous quote from Nelson Mandela, that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. It resonates with me, and
I like that.
I have committed to a culture of lifelong learning, and just to echo P Dog's sentiments there, that just continue. It doesn't matter if it's a PhD, if it's a master's, if it's a little online course, whatever it is, or whether it's even social learning. Don't underestimate the
Yeah,
strategy of just
yeah,
even teaching yourself something from YouTube, online, whatever. Just
yeah.
continuous development. And bank that stuff. It doesn't mean that you're using it today, or you're not gonna ever use it. And find a way to study. It will open so many doors for you. And I personally am an advocate for South African public university versus private. So that will go down well with the majority of our country, because that's what they can afford, if anything, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
So
correct.
I love our public universities. They're so well set up. They're so well run. All of our distinguished professors are there, and I had a phenomenal time and experience with really my university family. They've become a part of my journey for now 16 years.
Wow.
Wow, it's true.
Great.
Very
Great.
true.
Hey,
No,
PD, is there anything you'd like to just add on to
no.
this or
I just
before
want
you
to
bounce
thank.
out?
No, Sharoni came on board, yeah, and she did her job. She's convinced us. She's inspired us, and we thank you very much for that. And I'm hoping that there's viewers out there that really listen carefully and take every single word that's been said here seriously, and look for that inspiration. And I think there's just one thing, is that if you're going into something like this, ensure that you have a good support system in place. I think that support system plays a huge role in getting you past through past that finishing line, in getting to your through your goals, whether it's studying, whether it's a career goal, whether it's whatever it is. That support group plays a big role. And yeah,
Absolutely.
Sharoni,
Believe in
thank you.
yourself. You just got to believe in
That's
yourself,
it.
Peter. And
That's
like,
it.
sometimes kids are forced to study, or they don't have that full appreciation for it. And,
Yeah,
and really, you need to sit with yourself and introspect and look really deep within. Because when
yeah.
you want something and you really want it, inside of you, you're
You'll
going to
get
get
it.
it. you're going to
Yeah.
make sure it happens.
True. Sharoni, thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
think
Thanks, guys. It's
that's
been
it from us.
real.
Oweezy, finish it off, bro.
Yes, this is Sharoni PD. Oh, easy. Saying peace out. Take it easy. But one last thing. I think if there's anything we've learned from today's episode is the roots of education are bitter and long, but the fruits thereof are sweet and pleasant, like
And
a
I love
honey
that.
melon.
And everlasting.
And everlasting. Spoken like a true champ, PD. Guys, we gotta go. Cheers. Take it easy. Goodbye and
Ciao,
sayonara.
ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.